Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Can you see me and can you hear me? I hope that you can. Just to introduce myself, my name is David Spencer. I am the author of Gateway, and in fact, there is a new special Italian edition of Gateway 2nd edition, which is coming out now, called Gateway to Success. And this afternoon, what I want to do is to talk for approximately 1 hour, maybe a little bit less, but then you will have the chance to ask me any questions that you would like. I think I will probably answer your questions at the end of my session, not in the middle of my session, because it's going to be difficult for me to see all of your questions. Okay, it's lovely to see so many people here from, I imagine, from all over Italy and maybe from other countries too. Okay, now let's see if you can see my presentation. And you can see that the title of my talk is Bringing Life Skills to Life, Things that Today's Teenagers Need to Know. And I think sometimes people get a little bit confused about life skills. They think it's something pretty complicated, but I think it's actually very, very easy to understand. I think the beginning of life skills is students, for example, making comments like this, that what we learn at school is a waste of time. It has nothing to do with life after school. Now, I don't know if you agree with this statement or whether you disagree, or maybe like me, you believe that it depends. I want to sort of think about when you went to school. Certainly when I went to school, I think we learned quite a lot of things that were not directly useful in life. And I'm going to give you a simple example. When I was at school, I studied Latin. Now, many people think that Latin is the perfect example of something that is fairly useless. It's a dead language, so what is the point of learning Latin? But actually, for me, strangely, Latin has been useful for my life because Latin helped me to learn about things like infinitives, things like gerunds, things like different tenses, because maybe you know that in England, when we study English as our own language, we don't really study any of that grammar or any of that information. And all of that terminology and all of that information about Latin, for me, was actually useful. So it wasn't a waste of time. But I would say the difference between education in the past and education today is that in the past, things were only indirectly useful. Learning to translate Latin, you practice lots of different linguistic skills too. And so it is actually, you're using your brain in very useful ways. But I still think that you could argue that it's only very indirectly useful. And all of the maths that I learned, advanced maths, was probably for me personally not particularly useful, but maybe for somebody else it was. Now, I think that the difference with education today is that we are trying to teach things that help our students to function in the real world as soon as they leave school. And I think one of the reasons why we are now doing this is because certain sectors of society are worried about what our students are doing. If you look at this information, particularly look at the middle section, and you can see in the middle it says that 88% of British companies believe that school leavers are not prepared for work. And that's a very high percentage. 88% of our students are not ready for the world of work. And it says there, you can see in the middle, it says that one of the reasons for this is that our students don't have soft skills such as communication, teamworking, and resilience. So those things are important. I think we all agree that those skills, communication skills, teamwork, resilience, are all important. But businesses are saying that our students do not have these skills. Now, what is possibly a little bit more frightening, in my opinion, is that if you look at these newspaper headlines, which are fairly recent, 2017, 2016, it's not just businesses which are saying that our students are not ready for the world outside school. It is even universities who are saying that millennials aren't ready for the reality of college life and they cannot manage time or money. And it says that schools and exam systems are not preparing students to make the leap from secondary to higher education. Now, I think there are different sectors then of society which really believe that our students are not being prepared correctly. And maybe they are wrong, but maybe they obviously have some part of right, because otherwise we wouldn't be getting all of these headlines. Now, I think it's interesting that what has happened is education has responded to these criticisms. And for example, in the UK, there is now a subject called PSHE education. In fact, just next to me, I have some textbooks, okay, which you can see, which are teaching this subject. It's not a compulsory subject in the UK, but all schools are recommended to teach it, PSHE education. And that means personal, social, health, and economic education. And the idea is that this subject looks at things that can help students to achieve well-being. And I'll look at how it does that in a second, okay? But the UK has responded in this way, and that was about, I think, about 10 years ago, possibly even more. Meanwhile, in Europe, the European Commission for Education has talked about key competences. And these key competences, they say, should help our students to strengthen their knowledge, skills, and attitudes to help them to find personal fulfillment and later in life find work and take part in society. So this is clearly deciding that education needs to prepare students for life. And the way that they talk about doing it is by teaching traditional skills. And if you look at those traditional skills, we've got communication, digital skills, literacy. You'll notice that in the middle, I have underlined foreign languages. And that means, and this is the good news for us as English teachers, is that our subject is a life skill. And I think that's important for us to remember. In the 21st century, whether people like it or not, English is the international language of communication. And I would say nearly all of our students will need and use English in their lives once they finish school. Whether it's working in a company that has English connections. Of course, it doesn't have to be England. English is the language that an Italian would probably use to do business with a Russian company or a Slovak country or a Mexican country. So English is that new international global language. And so everything we do in our English language lessons is useful for our students today, tomorrow, and for the rest of their lives. But the European Commission also talks about horizontal skills. And it says they're learning to learn, social and civic responsibility, initiative, entrepreneurship, cultural awareness, creativity. And horizontal, that means that these things should be taught in all subjects. So in maths, history, science, and in English, students should learn these skills. And immediately when I look at those words, I think that we English teachers teach a lot of those things, don't we? Learning to learn. We teach our students how to read effectively. We teach students how to revise effectively. We teach them how to learn English. So we don't just teach them English, we teach them how to learn English the best way that they can. Cultural awareness is something that English teachers are doing nearly all of the time. Just learning the way that we form sentences in English is already a way of teaching cultural awareness. And of course, in most books like Gateway to Success, we talk about British society, Australian society, American society, and students learn about differences and similarities. We talk a lot about global citizenship. I think English has always been talking about that way that English fits into the world. And finally, that word creativity, I would think that you would agree with me that in English, we teach creativity all the time. Creativity about inventing stories, for example, creativity making speculation about photos, for example, but even creativity when we get students to think about grammar rules and how to form rules, how the rules are made. So we encourage all of these different skills, these horizontal skills, in our English lessons already, I believe. Now, of course, I'm talking to all of you Italian teachers, some people from outside Italy too, but of course you have this, which I've learned all about, this Agenda 2030. And you can see that section in the middle there, target 4.7. It says, by 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among other things, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. And I think this is very interesting. I travel around the world and I see different countries. I know that countries like Ukraine, like Georgia, they're all sort of working with similar plans. And I think that life skills, these global skills, these soft skills, global citizenship, these are becoming things that every teacher is hearing about, because I think that these are things that really society is demanding. Maybe sadly, society is demanding these things because things are not going particularly well at times. And I think it's interesting that it's like planning for the future, trying to get students to act as responsible citizens. It's maybe a sign of the times that we need to teach these things. But I think we would all agree that these are all positive things to teach, and in some ways exciting things for us as English teachers to teach. Now, I think that the easiest way for us to teach these things in our lessons is using them particularly as skills practice. We can use them for speaking lessons, we can use them to talk about, we can use them for writing lessons, we can use them for opinion essays, we can use them as really interesting reading texts, and we can use them as listening exercises, podcasts. And I personally believe that this focus on these different types of skills is not a problem. I think it's actually an advantage that now in English, we can use our lessons to talk about really important, useful subjects, useful today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the students' lives. So instead of talking about what we used to talk about 10, 15 years ago, talking about Madonna and David Beckham and famous people, we're actually using our lessons to talk about really important issues. I don't know if you would agree with me. I hope so. I hope I'm going to try and convince you that that is the case. Now, when I wrote Gateway 2nd edition, and when the new Italian version of Gateway 2nd edition was being written, these were sort of the topics that I personally feel are useful for us to talk about with our students. So we've got things like personal well-being, and that has been mentioned already. Personal well-being, I think, includes things like helping students to deal with stress, helping to build up their confidence. And I think these things, again, mental health these days is something that we are becoming more aware of, that is something that we need to teach our students to help them with. Obviously, we also have physical well-being. So we need to think about health, healthy eating, healthy exercise. ICT, so basically talking about digital skills, which are something that students have to know in the 21st century. Autonomy and enterprise, and getting students to be responsible for themselves, to get them to be responsible for their own actions, to come up with new ideas and to make them happen, which I think is something that's happening with many teenagers, but we need to promote that with all of our students. In fact, in Spain, this has been a subject on the curriculum recently. Then these buzzwords of citizenship, social skills. And I believe again that in English lessons, just by getting our students to often work in groups, to get them to work in pairs constructively, I think we're already helping them with some of those social skills, getting them to respect each other's opinions. Even teaching students to brainstorm is a way of helping with those social skills and with citizenship. The world around you is obviously talking about the environment, and obviously at the moment in the news we are continually seeing people like Greta Thunberg and lots of other teenagers forcing sort of the older world to take responsibility also for this global warming, all of these other questions, which I think we all agree are pretty important in the 21st century. We've got academic skills as well, and I mentioned that universities feel that our students are not actually ready for university. And so, for example, in Gateway, we teach the students to manage their time, which is something that I think is really useful now, and particularly at university. And then we've got the world of work. We said before that we need to help our students not to learn skills for a particular job, but to learn what we call transferable skills, communication skills, pair work, teamwork, all of those skills which are useful not in one job or two jobs, but basically in any job that the students may get in the future. Numeracy is something that probably we will do slightly less of in English lessons, but we can look at things like statistics and infographics. Money and finance, getting students to think about simple ways of budgeting, but also getting them to think about consumerism, getting them to think about whether they really need the objects that they buy, getting them to think about fair trade. And again, all of these are burning issues, I think, at the moment in 2020. These are all things that I think we would agree are important, and students can begin to get an idea about them. We're not teaching economics. This is not teaching students to become economists. This is teaching basic life skills about budgeting, about being sensible with your money. And finally, which some people don't always include in life skills, I strongly believe that art, culture, reading for pleasure, these are also things that we need to remind our students are important. I mentioned two words before, which for me are key, personal fulfillment and well-being. And I think that if we want our students to have that well-being, art, culture, reading, music are also part of being a well-rounded and fulfilled teenager. So those are the ways that I sort of categorized the different areas that I think are useful to teach our students. What I want to do now is to do a little quiz with you, okay? And I'm going to ask the questions. You can maybe try to write in your answer if possible. And if not, don't worry, just think to yourself, wherever you are, at home or at school or on the bus, just think about what your answer would be to this question. You've just got to guess, okay? The first question, how many millions of pounds of electricity are consumed each year in the UK by televisions waiting on standby? Now, of course, when your television is off, but it's still plugged in and the light is on, of course, that is using electricity and it's just wasting electricity. I don't know if you've got any ideas about how much money that could be, but I think you might be shocked to see that it is, in fact, £190 million. which is incredible. That's every year. Now, that means that we're just wasting energy and we're wasting money. So by thinking about topics like this, we're helping our students to think about the environment, and we're getting them to think about sensible consumerism. Okay, so that's a lot of money. Now, these are some pages from the new Gateway edition, Gateway to Success. And precisely in Italy, you're talking about sustainable development. Then on this spread, you can see that we're talking about sustainable homes. And there is a simple citizenship task at the end of the spread, at the end of the 2 pages. And basically, it's getting students to think about all of the simple things that you can do, anybody can do at home, to save energy and to save money. So if you look at some of those tips in the life skills box, we've got buy food produced locally, close the fridge door, have shorter showers, recycle plastic containers. Basically what we're doing is we're giving students skills practice in English. You can see on the other side, we've got this interesting text about tiny homes, which are often in the news. There's also television programs about tiny homes. But actually, it gets on to question 6 there in the white column. You can see that the students watch a video on downsizing, on minimalism, and they think about how downsizing can be good for your personal financial situation, how it can be good for your freedom. And obviously, again, the students will reply to these questions as teenagers, not as adults, but it's a first step, I believe, in getting students to think about some of these issues, which are based on their own daily habits, daily routines, but get them to start thinking about a global, bigger picture. Now, I've got a next question for you. How many minutes of moderate physical exercise or sport does the World Health Organization recommend teenagers to do minimum every day? I don't know if you've got any ideas there. How many minutes would you think a teenager should do each day? I don't know if you've got any ideas. Usually, when I ask this question, people usually think it's a little bit less than what the World Health Organization suggests. And in fact, they recommend 60 minutes every day, okay, for teenagers. Now, I don't know what you think. Yeah, okay, so Isabel thought 30 minutes. So yeah, it's more than that. Of course, that could include things like walking to school. So it's not just sport or PE. But of course, it is true that nowadays, many teenagers spend a lot of time in front of screens. They spend, maybe their mother or their father drives them to school. And in the end, it's probably true that many teenagers don't get 60 minutes of exercise. I don't know about your students, whether you think they do or don't. Maybe it depends if they live in a smaller village or in a big city. But basically, 60 minutes is the recommendation. Right, you thought at least 30 minutes. Yeah, at least 30 minutes, Alessia says. Definitely more than that. Now, what we can do here is we can get students to think about their own fitness program. They can actually think about how much exactly they do every day. They can then, and this is one thing that I think is really useful, is that we can involve teachers from other disciplines, from other areas. We can even get the students to talk to their PE teachers to also discuss ideas about how they could do more sport so that they could design their own timetable, not just for school, but also for sport. And of course, they're doing this in English. So we've got all sorts of skills. We've got integrated skills. We've got reading with the text. We've got listening. We've got watching the video. And then we've got discussion. And there's a very nice life task at the end. And then getting students to think about how sport can unite people, how sport can suggest equal rights even, and also helping students to think about Paralympics, about how all sorts of people can do sport. So it's basically looking at topics that students enjoy anyway, like physical education, like sports, but getting to think about them in a slightly different way, getting them to think about the values of this topic. Okay, and I've got another question for you now. In the US, in what percentage of cases has a company decided not to give somebody a job after looking at their social networking profile? Now, I think this is an interesting question because nowadays, a lot of our students use social media, and we think that students know a lot about digital media, digital skills, but of course, they often put things that are inappropriate on their social networking profile. And of course, today, whether this is good or bad, right or wrong, most companies will usually look at somebody's social networking profile before they decide to give them a job. Okay, and it's quite shocking to think that, oh, Carmela, that was actually, you're very, very, very close. Okay, Carmela has suggested 40%, and she's almost exactly right, 43%. Well done, bingo. Now, that's a lot of people who are not getting a job, right? That's 90% is quite strong, but that's a lot of people who are not getting the job they want because of inappropriate things they put on their social networking profile. Now, of course, they're young, so sometimes students do these things without thinking. So that's the moment when we as teachers should, not just can, but I believe should teach the students about these things, about the possible dangers, getting them to realize what could happen. Now, of course, it's not all negative because this text actually explains that many companies will actually give you a job because you have a positive social networking profile. So if it's something that people can see that you're dynamic, that you have different interests, that you have different skills, then of course that's a good thing. So basically, we're not sort of saying don't do this, we're saying do this, but do it carefully. And we're getting students to think about being safe on the internet, protecting themselves. Now, I've got a funny example, which is a true example. You can search this on the internet. This is a funny example of a student, a young person, not knowing what to do on the internet. We've got this young person who writes an email. This was 2007, a long time ago. If you read that email, the boy is basically apologizing for not being able to come to work. And they say that they've had to go to New York and it's just for a couple of days. So they're apologizing, which sounds like a good thing. But if you look at the date of this email, it actually says October the 31st. And I think we all know what happens in America on October the 31st, right? Now, Kevin sends the email, but unfortunately, the next day on his social networking profile, this is the photograph which he puts up. And of course, his bosses were probably thinking that he had gone to New York for something serious, because of a family illness, because of some other type of obligation. But they probably didn't believe that he was going to a fancy dress party. So Kevin, of course, made a big mistake by putting this onto the internet. And the next day he received an email from his boss, and his boss says, "Kevin, thanks for letting us know. Hope everything is okay in New York. Cool wand." Okay, and the sad truth is that after this exchange of emails, Kevin lost his job. So I actually show this to my students because it really makes them think, it makes them laugh, but then it makes them think about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate to share. And I think you would agree, when I think of my students, they know a lot about the internet, they know a lot about digital skills, but they are still young and they could still very easily do something silly like this, okay? So let's help them to be ready for the future. Now, I've got another question for you. I think this is an interesting question. You know, I imagine Italy is the same as Spain and the same as the UK, that often in supermarkets, you have offers where if you buy one item, you get one item free. I imagine you've all seen this and you've probably all bought something at some moment because it sounded like a bargain. But of course, when you buy, for example, one packet of cornflakes and you get one packet of cornflakes free, sometimes people throw food away. I think it's Angela, I can't read your complete name, but I think it's Angela believes 50%, okay, that people throw away. It could be. I don't know if anybody else wants to have another last guess. 50%, more, less? It takes a while. I know it's at 60%, Carmela. Right, the answer is a little bit less, okay? The answer is 30%, which you could say is not much, okay? But actually, of course, that has another danger, doesn't it? That means that in 70% of cases, people buy extra foods that they probably didn't need or didn't want, and maybe they consume it. So whatever way you look at this, it's not particularly good. Either we are throwing away a lot of food, which is terrible, I think, in this day and age, or we're consuming more food than we wanted, than we thought we should. Now, this is obviously a question, two questions, I think. It's a question of consumerism, and it's also a question of physical well-being, because maybe we're consuming too much. And again, I think that what we should be doing with our students is helping them to think about healthy options, healthy eating, what is a healthy snack, what is an unhealthy snack. And we've got two different things. For example, we've got the Citizenship Task at the bottom there, which is teaching these students about the FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, part of the United Nations. It's getting students to think about excessive consumerism. It's getting students to think about countries where food is more difficult to buy. There's also the task on at the end of the white column again there, the writing lesson, which is talking about the school cafeteria serving unhealthy food. And so imagining that this is the case, then the students write a letter suggesting changes to the menu. So we talked about autonomy, enterprise. It's getting students to think about, take the initiative on questions like this, and to think about what is better or not so good to consume. Right now, I think you can see that by talking about these topics, when we talk about, for example, consumerism, it could be an extremely heavy topic, but of course, we're making the topic appropriate for the age of our particular secondary teenage students. One of the great things about life skills is that there's lots of free material on the internet to teach these things. And somebody asked before, I think, if these slides will be available later, and yes, they will, so you can take down this information. But for example, the UK Red Cross, the World Health Organization, WHO, BHF is the British Heart Foundation, and Barclays Bank, obviously a big British bank, Barclays also have some great life skills videos. And these usually offer free material, which is divided into two sections, usually primary education and secondary education. Obviously, this material is written for British teenagers, so sometimes you might need to adapt the language, you might need to simplify the language, or you might simply need to decide how you can pre-teach the vocabulary the students need. But basically, if you look at those websites, I'm sure you're going to find some interesting texts, interesting material to use with your students. And I just want you to see one example, which is from the Red Cross. Now, I must admit, you'll have these slides or the PDFs later, but I'm not sure if you can now access this particular material from the Red Cross, because they go changing their material very frequently. And actually, I would bookmark the Red Cross, because anything which is in the news, particularly global news, they often prepare teaching materials for your students, which would be brilliant to talk about topical things that are in the news. But here's one little piece of material which I love, and I've shown this in many different places. It's a little quiz, and I think you'll enjoy this quiz. Your students will enjoy the quiz. I've got some questions for you, okay? It's about warnings and about warning signs. Now, the students see different signs and they have to decide what they think the sign means. But don't worry, because you get different options, okay? Now, this sign could mean clap here, or it could mean safety gloves must be worn, or it could mean odd gloves and other lost property. Now, I don't know if you have time. I won't go slowly, but I don't know if you have time to write in the answer. I think it's pretty easy, isn't it? But the correct answer, A, B, or C. I don't know if anybody can, one person can give me the answer. Anybody in there? B is the correct answer, Erika. That's very good. Okay, I prefer clap here, okay, but it's the second one, safety gloves must be worn. What about this one? Does it mean do not extinguish with water? Does it mean do not light a fire? If you do, we'll put it out. Or does it mean bucket loads of barbecue sauce available? Any ideas for this one? A, B, or C? It looks like it could be C, but it's not C. Anybody got this one? Yes, Angela is the first one. Angela, I'm not sure if you pronounce it Italian Angela or Angela, but anyway, I'll pronounce it both ways. It's obviously A. Yes, you're doing very well. Do not extinguish with water. I prefer C, but it's that one. This one is a nice funny one. Please walk with one foot on the pavement and one in the gutter. Dancing on stairs is prohibited. Or warning, drop. I think that one's pretty easy. I'm going to go quickly now, so don't worry if you don't have time to write your answer. But Erika is very quick as always. It's warning, drop. Okay, warning, drop. The fourth one, we've got 6. Okay, number 4. What does this sign mean? People wearing white will be split down the middle. Iron flat. Or safety overalls must be worn. Again, okay, very good. That was Lucia. Roberta. Okay, I'm not sure which question we're answering now, but yes, warning drop was correct before. It is, of course, safety overalls must be worn. Okay, that was the correct answer. Number 5, we've got, what does this sign mean? Broken arrows likely, danger electricity, take a sharp left, then a sharp right. I think that's beautiful. I prefer C, but I think we would agree, yes, I think we would agree that the answer to this one is, of course, B. And the last question, our last question, what does this sign mean? Extreme caution, Christmas is coming. Warning, low temperature. Crystals must be worn beyond this point. And again, the last one, I love A, I love C, but of course the correct answer is, as Maria has said, it is B. Okay, right now, of course, those are silly questions, they're quite funny, but now comes a bit of serious information, and I would say that I wasn't totally sure of the answers myself at first, but what we're looking at now, and this is the life skills part, we're looking at different types of signs and what they mean. And I think this is useful, getting our students to think about the different shapes, the different colors. Does anybody know what the answer is to number 1? A warning sign. So a warning sign is giving a sign of warning of a hazard or danger. Does anybody know, would that be A, B, or C? Is it round and white, round and black, or triangular and black? It's actually, I don't know if anybody knows. Okay, I'll tell you just to save time. Yes, thank you, Alga. 12, that was number 1 is C, okay? So it's a triangular shape. Now, mandatory signs are, in fact, A. That's right, A. And then number 3, not allowed signs are B. I'll show you the answers. Here we go. Okay, I hope you can see those answers there. Now, if you look at that, that's right. So it's 1C, 2A, 3B should be CAB. Let me just see if I can put them. Are they there? Yes, look, there we go. Oh, sorry, wait. Sorry, my mistake. I want you to look for a second, and if you look at the meaning, it says warning, it says mandatory and not allowed. Now, when I saw this, I suddenly thought that this is a great way to teach modal verbs of obligation. We can teach these signs with verbs like must, should, have to, can't, mustn't. So if we want, we can teach this life skill and teach some grammar at the same time, which I think is a nice way of doing it. The situation leads to the grammar. And we can get students to think about the concepts of obligation, what's the difference between a warning and mandatory, and that's obviously also the difference between should and must and mustn't. So we can combine the context with some grammar. We don't have to, but we can if we want to. And the Red Cross material ends with a lovely exercise where the students have to design signs for these things. They have to make sure that the sign is the correct color, the correct shape. Then the students could exchange their signs, and the other students then write a sentence in English. You must be careful because of blah, blah, blah. By the way, I love number 10, beware polar bears. I don't think that's very useful in Spain, and I'm pretty sure it's not very useful in Italy either, but it's still going to look like a very nice sign. Okay, so as I say, the main message I want to give you is that if you look at websites like the Red Cross, you're bound to find some nice material that can be used in English to teach a life skill. And as I say, those websites are often up to date. Now, I hope that I've convinced you so far that teaching life skills is a very useful thing for us as teachers and for our students to learn. But some people do have criticisms, or they have problems with life skills. And I want to look at a few and give you a few answers. Now, I think one of the answers, and I think with your, for example, the Italian Agenda 2030, anything like this, I think some teachers sometimes feel that we can teach these useful things. We can try to teach our students to be good citizens, but maybe they just won't pay any attention to us. I always explain an anecdote. I'm still a teacher. I think, I'm not sure if you know, but I write books, but I still teach every day. This morning I was at school. And I can teach a lesson about the environment, about ecology, about protecting our world, and the students sort of listen to me. And then I go out to the playground and I see them throwing all of their empty Coca-Cola cans onto the floor. I can see them throwing aluminium foil onto the floor. I can see them making a mess of the playground. And that's when I start thinking, well, they're not listening to me. Now, we have an expression in English, which is a lovely expression. I love this expression and I use it a lot. We say in English, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I think this has very much to do with our job as educators. I can try and persuade my students that the present perfect is really useful. I can try to persuade them that vocabulary for types of transport is really useful, but I can't make them learn that vocabulary or that grammar. I can only suggest it to them and hope that they learn it. But I read a book recently by a headmaster of Eton School. It's a very good book if you'd like to read it, An Intelligent Person's Guide to Education. And he says something which I think is very profound. At its simplest, schools give young people a place at the water's edge. A horse may not choose to drink if it is led to water, but it cannot drink at all if the water is not there. And I think basically this is saying that often students don't pay attention to us, but basically if we don't teach these things, they will never learn them. And it is our obligation, I think, to try to teach these things. And we hope our students pay attention, but if they don't pay attention, we still have to keep on trying. And I think that's why sometimes the job of a teacher is a difficult job, because it's frustrating, but I think that's why we have to continue, because our job is an essential job. And I think, for example, things like your Agenda 2030 in Italy is a good example of how important students and teachers are for the future. We are basically building the future, and I think we have to be optimistic that we're going to change the future. We as teachers and our students as good citizens in the future. I hope you agree with me. Here is a criticism. I don't want to make my students talk about incredibly personal or sensitive issues. They find it difficult to talk about them or to talk about them seriously, and even more so in a foreign language. Now, I have a confession to make to you. PSHE education also mentions things like sex education and drugs and anorexia. I personally will never include those things in my English textbooks because I don't think that it's a very easy subject to talk about in a second language. I believe that those things are very sensitive, very personal, and very important to talk about, but I don't think that students can do them very well or as well in a foreign language. And I think that we need to help our students to talk about them, but not in an English lesson. So for me personally, I would talk about them, but not in English lesson. Now, another thing, schools should not be obsessed with making students employable. I've talked about preparing students for the world of work. Personally, I feel worried if all we are doing is preparing the workers of the future. Rather than preparing the workers of the future, I want to prepare students so that they achieve personal fulfillment and well-being. So I want them to be happy, successful, well-rounded individuals. That also includes that they have employable skills, but I don't think that businesses should be in control of how education works. I think we should be free to help students to become good, well-rounded, and happy individuals. So not just employable. And you could say, I'm an English teacher, not a life skills teacher. I should be teaching vocabulary and grammar and stuff. And I think I understand this. I understand. If I talk about life skills today, maybe it sounds like I'm saying we shouldn't be teaching vocabulary, we shouldn't teach grammar. But of course, that's not true. I hope that I've persuaded you that we can do both. We can teach grammar, we can teach vocabulary. That doesn't mean we can't also teach life skills, and vice versa. Okay, so when you pick up one of my books, like this new book, Gateway to Success, or Gateway Second Edition, of course the books will teach the grammar, they'll teach the vocabulary. Also, very importantly, a good textbook will also teach exams. So teaching in Italy, I know that you have your Invalsi exams. So let's train them also to pass exams, because exams for teenagers are also a form of life skills. Our students need to pass exams. So if we help them to pass exams, we're also helping them to prepare for their future. So just because today I'm talking about life skills doesn't mean I'm not interested in grammar and vocabulary. I'm interested in both. And finally, really, on a philosophical point, I'd like you just to think about this. Students, whatever we do in our lessons, students are learning not just what we teach, so they're not just learning the grammar that we teach, they're not just learning the content that we're teaching, but they're also learning how we are in the classroom. And I think that we teach global citizenship, we teach respect, we teach patience, we teach tolerance simply by trying to be those things. Sometimes maybe we do get angry, and sometimes maybe we do lose patience, but I think it's even more important when we think about life skills to remember that we are a model of a respectable and respecting adult. And it's easier said than done, as we say in English, but I think we always need to remember that our students, consciously or subconsciously, are copying us, I think, in many ways. And I think an angry teacher will prepare an angry student. And I think an intolerant teacher will prepare an intolerant student. And as Maria says, and I hope I've made this clear, it's not always easy because things happen in the classroom. But I find it useful to sort of to try and remember this, that actually we are a model to our students always, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. Okay, we're coming to the end, and we're coming to the end of the hour. I don't know how many people here today know about the Gateway Facebook page, but I would love you to join if you would like to. So just go to Facebook and look for Macmillan Gateway and join up. We have 7,000, I think now 7,400 teachers, secondary school teachers all around the world. And we discuss things like the things that we've discussed today. There are lots of little jokes, like the joke there. I love the dog joke. If you can read that, I think that's quite funny. And you can also find out about things that I'm doing. And in fact, I have some very important news for you today, which is that, yes, I'm really looking forward to coming to Italy very soon. So I'm going to tell you some cities that I'm going to come and visit and be speaking at. So I hope there are people today from Torino, because I will be in Torino on Monday, the 23rd of March. I'll be in Milano on the Tuesday, the 24th. I'll be in Padova on Wednesday, the 25th. I'll be in Fano, Thursday, the 26th. And I'll be in beautiful Napoli on Friday, the 27th. Yeah, well, I would love to go to Rome too, Roberta. In fact, I would love to visit just about everywhere in Italy. I love Italy. I think this is my 7th trip, approximately, to Italy. So it's a country that I love coming to visit. In fact, in my talks, I will be talking about survival skills for teachers. Okay, so today we talked about life skills for students. And when I come to Italy, I'm going to be talking about survival skills. Okay, so I hope you enjoy that. I'm really looking forward to coming. If you want information about coming along to those talks, then look at the Mondadori education page. I think if you Google Mondadori education David Spencer, you should find out some information. Okay, and if not, if you join the Macmillan education page, then you can also, I'll also be putting up information about my trip to Italy. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm going to have a quick look at the question box. Let me see if I can see this properly. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask before we finish? I would love to go to all of your cities, I tell you. Alessia, so you'll be there, yeah, on the 24th. Come and say hello, Alessia, and tell me, introduce yourself to me. Remember that there will be a PDF of this session. There will be a recording of this session. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it informative. You can watch it again. You can see all of those links. Bimini, I'm going to have to find out exactly where that is. There are so many places that I want to visit. Do we have any more? No questions? Remember, if you do have a question, you can always join me at the Macmillan Gateway Facebook page, and I will answer all of your questions then. If not, it's been a real pleasure. Great, Alessandra and Fano, I'm looking forward to that. I've never been. I've been to Florence once before to give talks, but this time, unfortunately, no. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed you. I wish I had seen your faces. Right, the book that I showed you is called Gateway to Success. Would you like to see the cover? I'm going to show you the cover. I think this is the cover. Maybe it's changed, okay? But Gateway to Success, which will be coming very soon to your schools. I hope Mondadori will be making it available to you soon. And obviously also have a look at Gateway 2nd edition, which I'm sure some of you have seen. And in Gateway 2nd edition, you'll see lots of similar lessons to the ones that I've shown you. If you enjoyed the life skills session today, have a look at those books and you'll see lots of other examples. Okay, we're coming to almost exactly 1 hour. My timing has been good today, I think. I think I'm going to say goodbye to you. Luca, should I stop now, yeah, after 1 hour? I'm sure Luca will tell me to say goodbye. Thank you all. It would be lovely to see you. If you are coming to one of my talks in March, come and say hello. Okay, goodbye, and I'm glad you like the tiles, Ornella. Yeah, they're beautiful. I need to find some Italian tiles when I come to Italy. Cool, I've had a brilliant time. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the nice comments, okay? You'll get the slides from Mondadori, Mondadori Education. I'm sure they will, I don't know, they'll be in touch with you, or you can contact them and you can get your certificates. Okay, goodbye. Isabel, thank you for joining us from Argentina today. I'm not sure what time it is in Argentina, but thank you. Thank you, guys. See you again soon. I hope I'll do another webinar soon for Mondadori, okay? Goodbye.